Professor Mark Rosenberg, you're joining us now, and I mean, you've been looking at what's been playing out in the United States all the way through today, but long before that. In fact, you suggested, if I've understood your piece correctly, you suggested there are parallels between the sort of governance of Donald Trump and, in fact, what happened in South Africa during the dying days of apartheid.
Yeah, I think the underlying commonality is really the end of minority rule, in both cases white Christian minority rule or white minority rule in the case of South Africa, due to demographic change and due to institutional change or pressure for institutional change to lessen the impact of minority rule. In South Africa, of course, the majority minority rule was much more severe. The countries are very different in many other ways, particularly economically, but the underlying dynamic of political institutions under pressure due to demographic change is very similar, and you see that in our current election results, where Joe Biden is, commandingly leading in the popular vote, collecting far more votes on a national level than Donald Trump, and yet we're in a situation where the election is a nail-biter, where the president is alleging fraud because of the institutions that are set up in order to maintain effectively minority rule, and that's the similarity to South Africa.
We've also seen, and I mean, we remember the protests in South Africa, the anti-apartheid protests. We can go, all the way back to Sharpeville through the 1976 Soweto riots. I mean, the Black Lives Matter protests certainly have some sort of resonance, and so, I must say, does the response by often white police officers.
Yes, exactly. That likewise is a similarity in that the response of the security forces, domestic security forces, to this internal challenge, right, have been very concerning. I think what my colleague who spoke earlier said is exactly right, in that what we're now seeing here in the United States are levels of political uncertainty and potential political violence which are unheard of for this kind of developed market, right, a large established democracy with deep economic power and financial markets. This is the kind of thing that, in my former career as an Africa analyst, I would often advise clients and write papers on with regard to sub-Saharan Africa or other emerging markets. But U.S. politics are now quite similar to that.
I mean, and to extend the metaphor a little further, you tell me when I sort of cross the line, but there's also an appeal to a kind of nationalism, that people who are against me are undermining our entire nation. I mean, again, the similarity between P.W. Botha, his wagging of the finger, and Donald Trump's wagging of the finger this morning.
Exactly. I think there's two very different national narratives in the United States. You see that in the deep polarization of our electorate. You see that in the election results. And that likewise is quite similar. There was obviously two very different ideas of what it meant to be South African in the late apartheid, early democratic stage. There was the Rainbow Nation, which eventually prevailed, at least politically, and then there was the white Afrikaner, or at least white nationalist nation, and those two things were in conflict, and that drove a lot of the political and social uncertainty in South Africa. In similar ways, that's what's happening in the United States.
There's so much to talk about there. I mean, Anita, in a way, I would almost suggest, and I mean, you're from Texas, I'm not, that the way that it feels to be an American might have changed quite significantly over the last decade.
Oh, I think that's definitely true. I just want to alert you, by the way, to some news that's just come over the transom, which is that Kanye West has conceded after failing to get 0.5% of the vote in any state. It's just so comforting in this weird interregnum to be able to call a result definitively. And so I think we should probably bring it to the people of South Africa first. Kanye West is not going to be the next president of the United States. But
you heard it here first.
Yeah.
Anita Powell, journalist with Voice of America. Professor Mark Rosenberg, stay with us. We'll be back on The Pulse, special edition of The Pulse. More from the US elections, more conversations as well, of course, about the resonances between our society and the US society.